It's time to read your Bible. So shut your yapper and listen up.
Hey guys, welcome to another day of Amazingly Awkward Bible Stories. This one's a little bit more adult themed, so Mom might want to just have the older kids around for this one. So we're in Genesis 19, and we're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's just go ahead and read the story here real quick. It says, "The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. 'My lord,' he said, 'please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning.' 'No,' they answered, 'we will spend the night in the square.' But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we can have sex with them.' Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. He said, 'No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like to them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof.' 'Get out of our way,' they replied, and they said, 'This fellow came here as an alien, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them.' They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, 'Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, anyone else in the city? Get them out of here, because we're going to destroy this place.' They all cried to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." And so we'll skip down a little bit. Lot goes out and talks to his sons-in-law, and he says, "Get out," but the sons-in-law thought he was joking. And finally the angels say, "You just have to take your wife and your daughters and get out." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hands and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, Flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain, flee to the mountains." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please, if your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life, but I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That's why the town was called Zoar. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down the burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, including all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Then we'll go down to verse 30, and again, not a real pleasant story, but it's part of Lot's story, and then we'll finish up with Lot today. "Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day the older daughter said to the younger, 'Our father is old, and there is no man around here to lie with us, as is the custom all over the earth. Let us get our father to drink wine, and then lie with him, and preserve our family line through our father.' That night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and lay with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day the older daughter said to the younger, 'Last night I lay with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and lie with him, so that we can preserve our family line through our father.' So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and lay with him. Again he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He's the father of the Moabites today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami, and he's the father of the Ammonites today." Okay, so a few things here. Let's go back to the beginning of the story. Notice, first of all, that Lot is sitting in the gateway of the city. The city gate was kind of like City Hall. That's where they made all the business deals and important decisions for the city. When Lot is sitting at the city gate, that is showing not only is he living in Sodom, but he's become a city leader. Remember back when we talked about when Abraham and Lot separated, Lot looked down and saw the wealth of the cities, and he wanted a part of that. He wanted to be seen as a leader. He wanted the safety of the city. He wanted the people around, and he wanted to be known. And so he goes down and he does it. He accomplishes what he wants. He's a leader in the city of Sodom, and he's one of the leaders at the city gate. And so these strangers come, and we talked about this yesterday, this idea of hospitality. If strangers came to your city, it was your job as the leaders of the city to provide for them. And so Lot is telling these people to come to his house, and they kind of say, "No, we'll spend the night in the square," and that would have been an insult to the city and an insult to Lot for these strangers have to spend the night in the city square. And so he says, "No, come to my house," and they do, and they have their meal and whatnot. And then in the night, it says, all the men from every part of the city, both young and old, surrounded the house. So notice that it says all. That's important later on because remember that Lot has sons-in-law in the city, people married to his daughters. And it says all of them came, so they were there. They were some of Lot's family was in that crowd. Remember that Abraham was bargaining with God the other day and saying, hey, I know there's 10 righteous people, but we know that some of Lot's family was involved in this crowd that was coming to attack these men. And so Lot steps outside and he says, no, don't attack these men, take my daughters instead. And a lot of people kind of freak out about that because they're like, why would he give up his daughters to help these strangers? And of course, obviously, we never would in our society, and for sure, I never would. But again, if we understand that this idea of hospitality, of protecting strangers and protecting visitors, was seen as a higher virtue than protecting your family, it makes a little bit more sense. Again, it seems kind of crazy, and in some ways, I think it points to the corruption. Of Lot, but it also is not completely unheard of for that culture. The angels or the men pull Lot back inside and blind everyone, so again showing their supernatural power. They're telling everyone to get out, and he goes and tells his sons-in-law, and they just pretty much ignore him. And so finally they all leave. Notice in verse 16 that it says that Lot hesitated. Notice that he doesn't want to leave. This is like his home now, and he has power and position and probably wealth. And so he doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay there. This is where he wants to be. But the angels just drag him out finally. And even then we see that Lot's wife hesitates enough that she gets turned to salt. Notice in verse 18 that Lot wants to flee to a smaller city. Even now, even when God is destroying these cities and he's saying, go to the mountains. That's where Abraham was originally. And he says, go to the mountains. Even now, Lot still doesn't want to do it. He still wants to go to Zoar. He's still afraid. And so he goes to this little town. And then notice he stays in this town, but he doesn't stay there. Notice that he's looking around. He's like, boy, these people in this town are pretty bad. And the last time I was in a town that had bad people in it, the whole place was destroyed. Maybe this time I won't get a warning. And so he flees to the mountains finally motivated by fear. Notice where Lot ends up. He wants to live where he's wealthy and he's comfortable and he's around all these people. And he picks that when Abraham says, where do you want to go? He picks these things that he wants, and he ends up having none of them. And Abraham gets all the things that Lot wanted. He gets the wealth and the popularity and the leadership. And Lot, who picked those things over serving God, ends up with nothing. He just ends up living alone in this cave with his two daughters, and they end up getting pregnant from him. And they have these two kids, Moab and Ben-Ami, the Moabites and the Ammonites. And that's why in Moses' time, remember Moses is writing from 400 years later, that's what he says to this time, those are countries. Moab and the Ammonites are countries, and they're going to fight with the Israelites, and the Israelites do not like them. They basically consider them all corrupt because they're all descended from incest, and so they all consider them sinful and corrupt, and they don't like them at all. But what we see, the reason it's important is because we do see the Moabites coming into the story. In particular, the most famous Moabite is Ruth, and eventually that's where David's line comes from, and eventually Jesus. So even though the origin was sinful and disturbing, God still redeems that through Jesus. Eventually, Jesus himself is somewhat descended from Moab because he's descended from Ruth. So we kind of see why the people in Ruth's day didn't like her, but we also see how powerful that story in Ruth is, how God's redeeming this whole nation from this terrible past. And so again, we've talked a little bit about how the Bible is a story of redemption, and even in this terrible story of Lot, we see this seed of redemption starting where it's all redeemed later on through Jesus. So that's Genesis 19. I know it's kind of a hard one to get through, but we made it. See you tomorrow.